Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So it has been a little while since I've actually sat down and recorded a video. It's actually been probably like 6 or 7 weeks now since I've recorded and edited and posted a video. The last few videos were all pre-recorded, and the reason for that is because I was actually in Europe for 5 weeks. And so yeah, I was very busy. I was without Wi-Fi for a lot of the trip as well, so that's why some of my engagement in my videos were kind of down a little bit. But I am back and I am feeling good. I am feeling rejuvenated after that big old travel experience, and I'm back home and ready to just get some videos and stuff done. Today's video is going to be fairly short. There was not a whole lot of reading that I got done on my trip. So the months of August and September, I actually only ended up reading about 4 books, but they were all 5-star books. So I am still very excited to come to you guys today and chat about them a little bit. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the first book that I have to talk about is book 4 in the Circle of Magic series by Tamora Pierce. This is Briar's book. If you've been on my channel, you have undoubtedly heard me talk about this series before. I have been loving it. It is a little bit of sort of your typical young people in a magical environment type story, but I love it nonetheless. It is very well done, and the books are nice and short, which fits my reading style pretty darn well. So a little bit about the series. We've basically got 4 young people who find out that they have oddly specific powers, and they end up going to this place called Winding Circle, where they are kind of paired up with teachers and taught how to use their powers. Of course, different things start happening to them and to their school and to their teachers while they're there, and so they kind of have to learn to navigate their powers and work together to overcome all these obstacles. I have loved every book in this series so far, so it was really no surprise to me when I loved the 4th book as well. What I will say is that Briar is one of my favorite characters out of the 4 kids, and I was a little bit disappointed in his story arc. I feel like it could have been just that little bit more magical, but I still really love the story, still really love the characters and the settings and the writing, and so I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. So next up, we've got a book that I have read before and talked about before on this channel, and I love this book, and I read it towards the end of August when I started to feel a little bit slumpy, and I just wanted to read something that I knew would make me happy. So I picked up Horseradish by Lemony Snicket. This is Horseradish, Bitter Truths You Can't Avoid. This was the kind of book that I could sit down in my bed and kind of just like breeze through in an afternoon. It's not a very long book, and the formatting of the book is basically just like little blurbs and little sayings about life, so it was a very quick book to get through, and as per usual, I loved it. It put me into a great mood, and I can't recommend it more. And of course, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was actually a book that I listened to on audiobook while I was on my trip, and I absolutely loved it. This was The Feather Thief by Kirk Wallace Johnson. This book seemed to be very popular not too long ago. I was kind of seeing it here and there, hearing about it here and there, and a lot of people seemed to enjoy it. What I didn't know was that this book was actually based on a true story, and I believe that it's actually considered a non-fiction book, which I had no clue going through it when I was listening to it, because it really reads like a fiction novel, which is really cool, because I feel like that will get people who typically don't like to read nonfiction into reading nonfiction because it feels like a fiction story. So this story basically follows the author as he tries to find out more and more about the story of a young man named Edwin Rist, who back in the early 2000s decided that he would go and come up with this very elaborate scheme to break into a museum and steal a bunch of bird skins. So originally these skins were preserved by the museum for scientific prominence, and Edwin decided one day that he was going to come up with this elaborate scheme to go in and steal a few of the skins, and he kind of ended up getting caught up in the moment and stole a lot more than he originally intended. Now, the reason why Edwin wanted to steal these was because he was an avid fly tyer, so fly fishing. He liked to take very rare and prominent feathers and tie them into beautiful fly fishing ties. So that was kind of his motive. So a lot of this book is the author trying to understand a bit more about the story and a bit more about Edwin's motivation, because there was actually a lot of kind of mystery around who stole these bird skins for a very long time, until eventually everything kind of came out. And there was a very interesting court case about it all. So yeah, I think that this book could have a very wide reach in terms of its appeal, mostly because it is a nonfiction story, so it's kind of like a true crime story, but it's very much so written like a fiction book, which I think will widen its appeal to a lot of people. I personally loved it because it talks a lot about natural history and Darwin and Wallace and all of that. I have a great love of that kind of stuff because I like biology and science and that, so it was really, really right up my alley for me. But again, I think that it'll have a really wide appeal because of the way that it's written. So I highly, highly recommend The Feather Thief, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The last book on my August-September wrap-up was the Wayward Children's Series Book 1, and that is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. So back in, I believe it was July, I read Middle Game by Seanan McGuire. That was my first book by the author that I had ever read, and I absolutely fell in love with it and fell in love with her writing style. And so I decided to look at her other stuff and kind of figure out which of her series I might want to pick up next. And the Wayward Children series seemed perfect for me. It was subject matter that I was interested in, it sounded really awesome, and of course it was done by the author that I had just found out I loved her writing style, so kind of perfect. Also, they're very, very short books, which was really amazing because I much prefer short books to long books. Maybe that's just me, but I get a little bit distracted if a book is super, super long, so yeah. Although with Seanan McGuire's other book I didn't, because it was amazing, so... maybe it just depends on the author. I don't know. So if you guys haven't heard, which I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, the Wayward Children series is basically about children who go to other worlds like, you know, Narnia or Alice in Wonderland, that sort of thing, and then they come back to their own world and they end up going to this certain school to kind of deal with the aftermath of having gone to these other worlds. And first of all, coolest premise ever. Second of all, I thought that it was actually really, really well fleshed out in the actual book. Like, a lot of the criticism that I had heard about the Wayward Children series was that it didn't go deep enough or that it wasn't sensical enough, I guess, in a way, where I didn't really find that myself. And I think the reason why I didn't find that problematic or distracting in any way is because this book very much so read like a short story or like a novella, which it's under 200 pages long, so it kind of makes sense that it would read that way, and for that reason it didn't really bother me. A lot of the time in short stories you don't have time or page space to explain everything, and so there's a certain amount of sort of leeway that I find myself giving short stories in terms of explanations and making sense of things. And going into this book knowing that it was under 200 pages, I kind of adopted that same outlook towards reading it. So yeah, it kind of just made a lot of sense to me that it was written that way because it was so short. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense, but basically I just kind of try to look at it as a short story or as a novella as opposed to looking at it as a full-fledged book. And I think that that really helped with my enjoyment of the series because I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. So yeah. Anyways, guys, that is everything I've got to say about the 4 books that I read or listened to on my crazy journey across the pond. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts about these books down in the comments below. I'd be happy to read your thoughts. That's everything for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do not hesitate to like and subscribe for future videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye, guys.